to the Weekly Bioanalysis, a KCAS podcast.
Hello, and welcome to the 63rd episode of the Weekly Bioanalysis, the official podcast of KCAS Bioanalytical and Biomarker Services. KCAS is a bioanalytical CRO serving the pharmaceutical and biopharmaceutical industries for over 40 years. My name is Dominic Moreno, and I've been in the ligand binding assay and cell and gene therapy space for a little over 28, almost 29 years now. I'm here with my co-host, John Perkins.
Hi, I'm John Perkins, and I've been in the bioanalytical LCMS space for over 28 years too.
John and I are senior scientific advisors at KCS, and either or both of us are available to answer any questions you may have regarding this podcast or any of KCS services. I'm located in Kansas. John is in upstate New York. Our producer is in Missouri. So we're a little bit all over the map and enjoying this wonderful winter weather. We are thrilled to have you listening to the 63rd episode of the podcast, which is now available virtually everywhere. Wherever you choose to find and play your podcast, you can now likely find the Weekly Bioanalysis. We welcome all of you, whether you are joining us for the first time or if you are a regular listener, to send us some questions and give us some feedback. As always, today's podcast will be a review of the latest news and resources, and then a focus of a topic of our choosing. We're constantly looking for topics and would be happy to discuss something that you want us to cover. So again, we're fired up. That's a Boston word for you, John, to have you here, and we're looking forward to have a fun episode today. To kick us off for podcast 63, John is going to go over today's podcast topics a bit before we jump into the news and resources. John?
Hello. Yes, as usual, we'll start talking about the news and resources in terms of COVID, non-COVID news topics, and then wrapping up with the investment piece. And then we'll move on to the main topic, which we thought, as it's the end of the year and we're just wrapping up for the holidays, it'd be good to do a review of how 2022 has been for KCS and just how the company has transformed in that time.
Yeah, John, so it's a very exciting time. Why don't you go ahead and kick us off with the news?
First item up, and our only COVID item this time around, is Lilly's COVID-19 monoclonal antibody no longer authorized due to Omicron subvariants, FDA says. So the Eli Lilly COVID-19 antibody bebtelovimab, which is actually the one my wife and I were given when we had COVID earlier in the year, is no longer authorized to treat COVID-19 because subvariants of Omicron, BQ1 and BQ11, are actually not addressed by it, and they're at the stage where they're more than 50% of a number of individual regions, they're the dominant variant. So we are now at the stage where we have no antibody treatments if you are found to have an infection. There is actually one monoclonal antibody pair from AstraZeneca called Evusheld, which is used as a to help prevent COVID in people who haven't got it yet, for weakened immune people. But it's interesting to watch how this virus mutates, how it's actually continuing to reduce our options for treating it. So yes, I just thought it was an interesting thing to
it's not that surprising. I know that maybe isn't what people want to hear, but that doesn't mean we give up, and that doesn't mean there isn't hope. And there's, but first, maybe the biology behind it is that there's a reason why we don't treat hepatitis or HBV, HCVs, even like the papillomavirus. Although there are still therapeutic antibodies in that space, in general, they don't work. And this isn't surprising, just due to the evolution of the virus, the drift mutation. It doesn't, and I don't want to, and then I'll switch gears to, you said something interesting, that there's really no longer any antibodies out there. John, that's concerning. We don't want to give up. But that antibody pair.
And the industry isn't giving up. I mean, we know that people are working on other COVID.
There's a couple of things, right? There's convalescent plasma, which was proven not to be that effective, but I don't know about that one, John. If you know it, I do believe if there's somewhere in there the right donor pools for convalescent antibodies, and that's just meaning they take bulk plasma or serum from people who are COVID positive, and they kind of they don't isolate out every anti-COVID antibody, but that has had some efficacy in a subpopulation. But it needs to be there's an instance where biomarker testing of the therapeutic antibodies and then some sort of companion diagnostic of the people receiving them could potentially link the two, because I do think there's benefit to that. It's been shown in like all sorts of IVIGs. That's what we're talking about, which is intravenous immunoglobulins, and they've had great benefits for decades now. This is like the first true therapeutic people were taking, even before they knew matched, blood types and all that sort of stuff. You just kind of sticking a line from one person to the next and hoping for the best, right? Like desperate times call for desperate measures. But I think if I don't know if my opinion matters, John, but that's where the research should be. Some sort of like, hey, how can I get the convalescent antibody products to have some sort of indication that they would be effective in a certain population? Because it's not going to work broadly. And then the approach, and I'll switch gears to the monoclonal antibodies, they need to be cocktails. And you already touched on the pair. We were working on that, but that's where we kind of fizzled out with the partnership in pharma, because that would require multiple groups to get together and say, hey, I got a handful of antibodies plus my handful, and you could see a cocktail of maybe, I don't know, upwards of 10 or 15 or 20 different antibodies. That would be a powerful, but that's just not theoretically achievable today.
We've seen other cocktails being used. I mean, there were Regeneron ones earlier. Eli Lilly had a antibody pair that was used for early variants of the disease, but again, like you said, the disease is mutated, and so they've been rendered ineffective. And so we know that people are working on this. I'm sure we'll see other drugs authorized. I just thought it was interesting that Right now we don't have an antibody treatment in our armory for dealing with things for people to have as in addition. If they've been vaccinated, it's something you can have in addition to that. If you're infected, it's really down to the oral therapies of Paxlovid, Merck's antiviral, and then Gilead's Veklury. So we know that COVID isn't being ignored. It's just right now it's sort of one of those dips, but I'm sure we'll see other treatments come through.
What was hydroxychloroquine? Is that the other one, or
don't even go there?
Oh, I had to drop that in. But no, and John, we've seen personally. There's a huge uptick in COVID. I think we're all kind of, I don't know. It's a weird time. You can't tell if it's something we're gonna just kind of power through and hope that both vaccines and herd immunity will kick in, and maybe it is. But I do know personally, there's just seems to be a rash of it around me and people I know, and that, knock on wood, I'm still dodging bullets here. Unlike you, John, I don't think I've ever actually had COVID, or at least been asymptomatic to the best of my knowledge.
Sure, yeah. So I've had it, but like I've mentioned before, I'm fully vaccinated. So I had the bivalent booster, and my wife has, and we were talking last night over dinner about my son and his wife were talking they should probably do it too, because I think they're a bit in Boston, so probably more chances of catching COVID than we do here, because we're a small community, we don't really mix.
So I think it's even I just wonder, well, now we're getting into maybe off topic a little, but I wonder when is the right time to take, not the boost, but when's the next iteration? Like, I took a flu shot this year. It seems like there should be a COVID shot annually, but I digress.
Well, I had the topic in here, which I dropped because I knew there was going to be a lot of pressure on time. But I know the FDA is having like an advisory committee meeting to talk about. They're doing it early in the new year to talk about what they're advising in terms of approach for vaccination and where they'd like to see developments go in this area in terms of how they want to possibly design vaccines, etc. I think that will be an interesting thing to watch. It was certainly an interesting topic, but like I say, it got dropped due to time.
Yeah, well, definitely.
It was talking about this is upcoming as opposed to saying here's what was discussed and here's what they want to do. So that's why I dropped it. Well, let's move on. I think it's that we touched on COVID, and it's a sort of quiet time at the moment, but I'm sure we'll hear more. it's certainly quiet on the medical front. But like I
Well,
say,
I'll say
we
this: it's
don't
got my
see.
wife. It's got my wife very worried about bringing COVID to my in-laws. So
Yeah, yeah.
it is putting a small damper on Christmas because of that. But let's
Yeah,
move on.
I think round here, I haven't heard much about it spiking round here.
But I
So I
think
think, right,
that's the rub, right? Like
yeah.
throughout, even now, I can tell it's stressing her as we prepare to go visit
Hmm.
our in-laws for Christmas. But yeah, John, tell us about the next
So
topic,
the
huh?
next one, this is, it was actually triggered by an article in the Washington Post, and there's an awful lot in this. I'm not quite sure how much we'll cover, but this is interesting. That it's basically the actual article in the Washington Post was weight loss drugs like Ozempic, Mounjaro, Wegovy gain popularity effectiveness, and the interesting piece here. It's not just that they're gaining popularity. The actual drugs they were originally developed to help treat diabetes. These are they're analogs of naturally occurring peptides. So GLP-1 is one of the peptides in the body. The other one is GIP, and I don't know what glucagon like peptide one is the GLP-1. I'm not sure what GIP stands for. So basically, Ozempic and Wegovy are the same drug. Ozempic is its anti-diabetes marketing. Wegovy is the anti-weight loss, and that's semaglutide. Which another reason for throwing this in there is we've actively done some work on that, collaborating with a number of people in Habibi's discovery team, and actually the my presentation at EBF was touching on analysis of semaglutide, liraglutide, and then exenatide, which is more closely related to natural peptides. And for us, these are interesting drugs because they're analytically really challenging. They in terms of drug design, they're peptide based, but they have lipid portions added to them because that helps their physiological behavior in terms of their PK. It helps them hang around the body longer, so they actually then obviously can treat the condition. So in term when they were being clinically assessed, like with I'm going to call it Ozempic, but it's semaglutide. When it was being clinically assessed, they noticed that subjects were actually losing weight. So therefore, there's another possibility. And it's quite common for drugs to be repurposed in development. Viagra is a classic case of that, which was being developed for a cardiac condition, and then they noticed side effects, and then it became, a erectile dysfunction drug. But what's happened now is because you've got not two almost competing populations, where you've got the diabetic population who need these drugs, but also there's people who are seeing significant losses of weight. Both populations need and want these drugs, but like I mentioned, they're complex molecules, so obviously the manufacture is complex too. So there's now a shortage of them on the market. So there's quite a dilemma here for for doctors and for the manufacturers, and trying to get through this, because the drug shortage piece, and I'll let you get a word in edgewise in a minute. The
Mm.
drug shortage piece isn't just these drugs; it's happening with other drugs out there, but it's the spotlight is on these because of how important they are to in terms of treating diabetes.
Yeah, well, you can't get children's Motrin, right, John? So there is a
Yeah,
drug
absolutely.
shortage, and
Yep,
this.
yep,
So I
yep.
just there's a lot to unpack here. It's a really interesting thing. First, it's gastric inhibitory polypeptide is what that is. So all these
Thank you.
things are
Yes.
related to. They're like homologs of insulin, basically, right? They all have these. It's still it's somewhat known, but it's still somewhat unknown in terms of just the whole regulation, metabolic regulation pathways are evolving, and I'll leave it at that, right? So,
Hmm.
and these drugs remind me a lot of like fen, if you remember that from a long time
Yeah.
ago.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Um, and so you're right. There's so the juxt of the article is diabetic patients can't get their medicines because they're being used as weight loss drugs. But then it gets worse, right? The people who need the weight loss the most can't afford them. So it's a whole. It seems like a very vicious cycle there, and in general, I know some people taking some of these for weight loss. It does suppress your appetite. I haven't seen noticeable weight loss in these people. I don't mean to, and I see there's like a BMI, body mass indices of over 30. And John, I fall into that category, but I'll knock on wood. I have no, I'm healthy, even though
Yeah,
I'm
sure.
a
Yeah.
high BMI and over 50, but I work at it, right? I do a lot of things. Even this morning, got on the ground and did some push-ups and stuff. But when it comes to weight loss, if there's something that can help you and these appear to be effective, they're good. But, it's a lifestyle thing. And I don't know if medication's the way to do it. I worry a little bit some side effects of these things.
I think some of
Yeah,
it might be lifestyle, but also some of it isn't. I mean, there are people who have conditions that basically lead to excessive weight. I mean, but I think it's interesting. Like, I mean, even the Washington Post headline says weight loss drugs like Mounjaro. Mounjaro isn't officially a weight loss drug. It's actually not approved yet. It's likely to be approved.
that's scary. Yeah.
It's like, so it's actually Mounjaro right now, and the name, it's tirzepatide, and so it's been approved for for treating diabetes, but it hasn't been approved for weight loss. So again, what plays into this is off. What do you call it? It's
Off
basically
label. Yeah, it's off label.
off
Yeah.
label prescribing, exactly, which is feeding into that shortage. I mean, so it's like, yeah, there's a lot to unpack here, definitely.
Yeah. And I don't envy any
But
physician or,
when you talk
person.
when you talked about the expense of it, and it is, I mean, it's like it's around 1,000 to 1,300 a month for these drugs. But then, further down, it says that actually Novo Nordisk, who manufactures semaglutide, are actually they've got a phase 3 trial looking at I think it's to see if it reduces the risk of heart disease and stroke. So they're actually looking at other indications that may make it, if it really is a life-saving drug, as opposed, I mean, they can definitely point to being life-saving, then that 1,000 to 1,300 doesn't seem quite so expensive after all. So it's a there's tons in it. It's really
Yeah.
that this is the reason why the FDA AdCom thing got dropped, because I thought there was so much in this to discuss, and it's a fascinating area to see how this is
Yeah.
developing.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
even as I sit here, I have like an internal conversation with myself around, oh, should I try these things or shouldn't I? I mean, I
oh,
don't envy any physician who has to try to look at somebody and balance all that, right? It's got to be,
and people are getting information from TikTok, because
yeah,
people are doing videos on TikTok to show the effectiveness of semaglutide, and so there's a whole load of stuff feeding into this. It's like, yeah, it's.
don't take medical advice from TikTok,
Oh no,
please.
I wouldn't
Not
ever
you.
at all. But this is that, like I say, there's so many different things feeding into this. So you've got social media's feeding it, you've got off-label
Yeah.
prescription feeding it, you've got two different medical conditions that obviously both. I mean, to
John, I could sing the ad for you.
some extent,
Oh, yeah, there's an
the
ad.
diabetes.
Go ahead.
Sorry,
Sorry.
was that Dominic?
Yeah, that was me. Sorry, I was just thinking about the man. There's a whole ad out there for this, John, and famous celebrities kind of selling these items. So to your point, it's like everywhere, right? It's a very
Yeah,
prominent
yeah,
thing here, and more people know about semaglutide and all these things that yeah, they're getting it from multiple sources, and I don't know. I'm really mixed about it all around. It's kind of
sure.
a
Yeah, I think someone makes the case in the article that that we shouldn't look at it as two competing conditions, and some people have a medical need for obesity, but those aren't necessarily people who are trying to get semaglutide. I mean, you're right. Some people are. Oh, I really could do with getting a bit thinner. Another article that I didn't touch on, but I think it is absolutely fascinating, that semaglutide completely turns people off food. That's part of
yeah,
where the success comes
yeah.
from, and it's I think it was talking to someone who was diabetic, and they loved food, but they were put on this drug, and all of a sudden they just don't want to eat anything. And even the person who's the subject of this Washington Post article says, it used to be that if I saw food, I'd want to eat it. Now I have 3 or 4 bites of food, I don't want to eat more. So that's what that's what the drug does. It's completely. I'm like, I don't want to touch a drug like that. I love my food,
Yeah. I don't, I'm torn. I know somebody who's on it, and they say similar things, but I don't know. And by the way, I think I'm going to have to ask our producer to edit out my singing. Now you know why I am in science and not in any sort of musical career. I just realized I was singing on the podcast, John. That's got to be a first.
'Tis the season. You're obviously in a
Yeah,
good
I don't know
mood.
what's wrong with me this morning, but I throw mercy on Jeremy to edit that out for us. So, no, and back to this topic, but it is like I think we could do a whole podcast on this, John. It is such a it's to the thought, just like you said, well, why would I want to take something that would stop me from eating, right? Like, hang on a second, but I don't know, and then it seems like is it sustainable? So say you're like in your 40s and now you got to take this medicine for the rest of your life. Like,
Yeah,
is there an end in sight? I mean, I get it for a diabetic. I kind of understand that. Not kind of. I definitely understand that. Having some, not just type 2 relatives, but some type 1. I have some type 1, a couple relatives with type 1 diabetes, and they have pumps on them and legitimately say that's like life-saving to them, right?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
The type 2 one, you know, I feel like that's something that it's the reason why I'm some point today gonna go try and run on a treadmill or something. So it's just part of like the knowledge of that keeps me wanting to avoid having to take medications for the rest of my life. But it's not about me. Sorry, I'm making it about me. But it is definitely something that, as a society, we wonder about the burden it might bring, because now you're seeing competition, and that's what this article is really touching on.
Yeah, yeah.
People who may need it for their diabetes, but one could make a case that if I'm morbidly obese or I'm going to die of a stroke or a heart attack or something, then I'm in the same medical state as they are. So
Yeah,
maybe I'll end with this. We need to make more drugs here in the U.S.
There's an interesting line in this. Obesity specialists argue that patients with serious weight problems have an urgent need for new medications and that they have fewer treatment options than those with diabetes. So, I mean, there's, like I said, there's a lot to unpack in this. It's really interesting. They also say that more than 40% of US adults are obese, another 30% are overweight. So again, there's a huge market there.
Yeah.
From what the articles have said, 'cause there's a number of links to this. Both Novo Nordisk and Eli Lilly expect their current shortage to be resolved by sometime in Q1, and obviously, but then the expectation is that the FDA will approve Mounjaro or tirzepatide for weight loss. So then it'll be interesting to see does then that cause another
run on that one,
another supply issue, because then you've got two populations who are now officially okayed to use it, and it takes away the off-label prescription piece. So we'll watch this.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
interesting stuff, John.
yes.
The next article is one that has long been something that I've actually kind of researched a little, and certainly think this is the future of science a little bit. Yeah.
Do you want to go ahead then?
No, you tell us about it.
So this is actually one that was dropped from the last podcast because of time. But I thought, to me, it was, like you say, it's a way of the future, and it tells you, this is why medicine and the medical field is so fascinating. There's so many people are approaching health from so many different angles, and this is something I never really considered. But it's basically, the headline is MIT study finds new way to dissolve stents and staples, and so basically, if you have surgery and they're using, it could be a stent or a staple, if it gets to the stage where it's healed, the staples have to be surgically removed. So it's like you have to go back in, and it's an invasive procedure to take out what originally applied to help deal with the condition. So this is researchers from MIT have developed devices that can disintegrate on demand. In a study published in the journal Advanced Materials, they described the use of eutectic gallium indium e-gain, a liquid metal alloy of gallium to help break down medical devices made from solid, I'm going to pronounce it the British way, aluminium. So it's basically, they're working on the principle that it's known that certain liquid metals get into the grains of solid metal and cause them to dramatically weaken and fail. So they're actually, this research team wanted to see if they could really control that to then lead to devices that with time will dissolve and takes away that need to then invade the body to remove them once they've done the work in the body. So they're looking at a number of different alloys to see what. How they all behave, and I think they looked at it in the GI tract. I think they just tested the metals, but now they want to go to animal testing to see if this is surgically applicable. But it's one of those things, you read this and you think, well, it might not be surgically applicable now, but you know that with refinement, this is coming in the future. So that's my piece. So,
I just sit here with a big, huge grin because this is why we got into it, right? Like, it's awesome that someone at MIT is working on this. Plus, you said aluminum, really funny. I thought that was kind of good. Aluminium is, but aluminum.
Aluminium, that's the way we were raised in the UK.
I guess I hadn't really picked up on that until you said it. But, so this is, as you mentioned, it's almost like X-Men stuff a little bit, but it's getting into where medicine is. What there are, you have stitches, dissolvable stitches now, right? But I think they're like collagen based. There's no metal in them. There's actually, you can use silk. That's another naturally occurring compound. It forms a lattice, and that could be some sort of framework. And silk is, we've done some work in silk where it can be it can deliver a payload. There's even it does have wound applications because that would naturally dissolve, right? But this is to me, this seems like it's a lot more durable if it's got some aluminum in it. And then there are actually some, there are studies where people would put some sort of surgical stitch in, and then they could use vibrations to knock it out, John, right? So this is not, or some sort of laser to dissolve it. There's techniques there. But again, that's not sustainable for rural Indiana, random state, rural Indiana doctor's office, or surgical office to have all that. That would require massive pieces of machinery with it. Where this is like, it's just like pulling this has the potential of being no different than any stent we're currently using, and that, like you said, that would be a huge, a couple things, not just a financial benefit because of the lack to have to go back in, but just on the patient side of things, that's phenomenal to not have to. I haven't gone through any major surgery, but I hear going back in to get your stitches out, it's just not fun. As you can imagine, it's not a fun event. You got to kind of relive it, and then just getting there. So I think we're going a little long, John, but this was a great article. And like I said, I just sat here with a huge smile on my face. I think this is what I hope, maybe I'll go tell my son about. So maybe he'll get into science.
Yeah, just to give a bit of background, and we'll move on. But the driver for this was they basically, it was one of the senior author, Giovanni Traverso, is an assistant professor of mechanical engineering at MIT, and they were originally developing metal devices that could stay in a patient's digestive tract to administer drugs. It's a drug delivery thing over the course of several days or weeks. But then they stumbled across that they had to remove the devices once those drugs were delivered, using surgery to get them out. So that's where it's coming from. So they did it by paint. They painted the metal with this liquid metal, showed that it did do what it's supposed to do. So then it's really now goes into real testing to see if it's something that we can then be applied to human in the long term. They've shown that the alloy is non-toxic to rodents, so they have that in their back pocket. But awesome. It was something to watch for.
Yeah, it's awesome.
In terms of moving on, in terms of other technologies that and applications, and although there's a lot here, we might be able to whip through it fairly quickly. It was actually we going back to the beginning where we talked about limited treatments for COVID. Obviously, the dominant vaccines have been the mRNA based vaccines from Pfizer, BioNTech, and Moderna, but mRNA hasn't stopped there. It's actually just in the last few weeks, there was a number of articles about where mRNA is being investigated and may contribute in a number of different conditions. And it's really, there's a lot of focus on mRNA that it could really be, it's going to be a big contributor in terms of vaccines for the long term. So I mean, these all have similar mechanism of action, where the mRNA serves as a blueprint that tells the body cells how to produce the proteins. So that then the cells take up the mRNA and begin turning the proteins out, and then the immune system produces antibodies in response, training to recognize and attack foreign invaders that contain those same proteins. So that's how it works. So, like I said, there was a number of articles, and the first one was influenza. So this group at Perelman School of Medicine at University of Pennsylvania are actually looking at developing an mRNA-based vaccine capable of going for all 20 subtypes of the flu virus. Now, we go for the different. Basically, the way the flu vaccine works at the moment is people come together and discuss what they think are the four most likely variants to hit in a certain year, and they'll base the vaccine on that piece. And so it's a gamble. They may get the variant right, they may not. So that's what you're never really sure if the flu vaccine is going to be correct for a certain year. By taking this approach, they can go for all 20 variants. Then it gives you a universal flu vaccine for the long term. And I'll pass it back to you.
Yeah, no, this is why mRNAs are so powerful. This is, early on COVID kind of accelerated this, but now you're seeing despite a real tragic pandemic, you're seeing some of the collateral benefits, John, and that's what this is. So it does hold as you mentioned, the traditional way of a flu vaccine is an egg. They grow it in eggs, and then they have to, like you said, there's 4 strains, and they try to predict it, and we're getting better at it, but we're lucky if it has 50% protection is a good year, I think. Typically it hovers between 30 and 50, which sounds horrible, but really it's hard to measure if it causes a lesser infection as well, meaning, you get you might get the flu, but it's not nearly as potentially fatal. It's much less virulent is the word I'm trying to come up with in terms of the disease itself. But these are, I don't have much more to say other than, mRNA would, trying to do all 20 by the egg is virtually, I don't think the egg itself could make it. And then it's even technically challenging, right? Manufacturing that is almost impossible. mRNAs, sky's the limit, 20, 50, 100, I think they could do. So it makes a lot of sense. I still think even as we get better and better with our technologies, that bug, I think of it as a bug. The influenza is going to it'll start to adapt as well. So we're always going to be chasing it. Sure. I think it's something, I don't mean to be Debbie Downer there. I don't mean to be a downer, but I think as we begin to evolve, even if we do get a 20 lineage, maybe it bumps it to 60, 70%,
Yeah, but it's still a step forward from where we are.
Massive. I can't emphasize that enough. Yeah, it is a collateral product of COVID. We've leaped decades in the mRNA space.
Sure, so what the researchers did was they administered the vaccine to mice and ferrets. They exposed them to flu viruses from all 20 lineages, and they all found that all the animals weren't completely protected, but they had no severe disease or death. So it was doing its job in the animals, and their level of antibodies remained high months later. So it's
disease severity, John. That's what I was trying to say. Severity.
Yes, exactly.
Now, good. Maybe we'll touch on the next two as well. Yeah.
So the next two are quick 'cause it's more the same theme, but just shows where people are heading. They're actually also there's a group looking at mRNA for malaria and a malaria vaccine, and these are scientists at George Washington University in DC, and their approach is to build a two-part vaccine, which doesn't just prevent malaria in the person, but prevents spread of malaria, because the way malaria spreads is that if an infected mosquito bites you, you get malaria. Then, if a non-infected mosquito bites you, it drinks your blood, but it picks up the infection. So then it's infectious going forward. And this vaccine is designed to prevent that piece. And actually, it gives a more complete approach to trying to prevent the spread of malaria. It's in preliminary testing, they're showing a 95% efficacy rate against transmission and an 85% effectiveness against infection in rodents. We talked earlier in the year about Mosquirix, which is the GSK vaccine, which was approved, but it only has like a 35% effectiveness rate. But still, that's still a giant leap forward from where we were. So I'm not knocking that at all.
No, I take that chance too, right? Like,
It,
that sounds good. Give me a shot. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So it's just, again, it's typical medicine, isn't it? You get that first block in place, and then other teams will try and build on that to improve our options in the long term. And this looks like mRNA may really make a difference in malaria treatment long term.
Yeah, I
And
think you
I'll
summed it up
pass it back
nice.
to you.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add is that how evasive it. You described it nicely. The cycle of why malaria is so. I think of it as evasive. It's just what you said. That, and I think it's funny we're talking about they drink blood from you, but when you're infected and a mosquito bites you, and it's just, you can imagine that's just one big vicious cycle of, and we
Yeah,
can't
yeah.
vaccinate the we can't line up the mosquitoes and give them vaccines, but this is really the approach to ablate it, and that has always been the probably the holy grail of malaria is how do you stop the mosquito from being the carrier, and so this is again just great science and some collateral benefit from the pandemic here. I mean, I think it's leaps and bounds and so much more confidence in terms of just being able to do trials with this stuff, because I think it's always been percolating. This is just causing it to rise up little quicker due to the massive scale up we've had of mRNAs and just how safe we think they are. So, John, last
Yep.
but not least, right? Everybody's favorite,
Do you want
cancer.
to take that one?
No, go
Go
ahead.
for it. Yes, yes. You
No.
go. You go for. I'll let you do this one. Yes.
Yeah, well, so Merck and Co are working on with Moderna. It looks like, right, John, and they've got a
Yes,
mRNA
absolutely. Yep.
candidate. This is getting into like personal mRNAs, which are
Yep.
really Star Trekky to me, but they look like they've found ways to treat melanoma by
Yep.
targeting checkpoint inhibitors, as well as. So, John, I'm having trouble circling what they did here. You pick it up for me.
So they had a candidate. It was a personalized mRNA therapy, and they co-administered it with Keytruda, which is an uh, approved medication. And so they showed that. I'm trying to think. They
Well, Keytruda is an
basically.
anti-PD-L1, so they did it in conjunction. Sorry,
So
continue. Yep.
So they analyzed the patient's tumor, identifying mRNA that could trigger an immune response, and encasing the molecules in lipid nanoparticles to hopefully improve the survival. And what you're right, it was patients with stage 3 or stage 4 melanoma, and what they did in terms of combining this mRNA 4157 with Keytruda, reduced the risk of recurrence or death by 44% compared to Keytruda alone. So you're right, it's personalizing it to the patient, but
Yeah.
really making a difference to their chance of survival, etc.
It doesn't really give great detail here, but I'll try to take a stab at it here, John. So like all tumors have tumor associated antigens to them, right? And melanoma has MARTs and other things like that. It looks like they took some sort of I can't tell if it's going to be um, neoantigens found in a patient's tumor. So it looks like they took one neoantigen and designed this. It's not like it's going to be, and I can't tell if like every time they need to take a piece of your tumor and design the mRNA. That'd be awesome. Maybe that is the future. But that's in the past, John. So especially like early 2000s when I was in getting my immunology doctorate, we were pulsing dendritic cells with tumor associated antigens, and people still do that. That's a
Hmm.
you can take out someone's cells, educate them against a tumor associated antigen, and insert them back into them, and they'll get circulating tumor specific T cell responses. It's just they don't always make their way to the tumor, right? The tumor microenvironment is still a challenge. It's got so even if
Yes,
the
yep,
cell is armed and it gets there, the tumor microenvironment does all sorts of things to maybe even shed a little bit, let it think it won, or even just knock it out and convert it into a non-inflammatory or pro-inflammatory or anti-cancer into some sort of chronic, right? It can switch it. The CAR T cells are overcoming that because of their longevity and some of their specificity that they're doing. This is an example of the next, to me, it seems like it's the next step in tumor associated antigens. And it's just wonderful, right? Again, this is why
yep,
these mRNAs are so powerful, because there is the possibility that, someday they come in, they take a little tumor biopsy from you, and then they can just make it, because mRNAs are easy to make, John, right? They're not an expensive thing to do. And so then it would just create one and boom, give it back to you. So kind of cool.
yep, yep.
So,
So let's move on to the last topic, and hopefully this can be brief. But it draws a line, at least to a partial line, under something that's been dragging on for a long time, and it's two articles combined. Elizabeth Holmes gets 11 years for Theranos fraud, and Sunny Balwani, former Theranos executive, gets nearly 13 years in prison. We've talked about Theranos and what Elizabeth Holmes and her colleagues did, and basically they raised a lot of money on a diagnostic instrument that basically did not work at all. But worse than that, when they were saying we're doing blood tests on this instrument, they were actually running it on secondary instruments and passing off those data as coming from a Theranos instrument. So this case is dragged on for a while. They haven't yet. They've got sentences, but they haven't yet been given financial penalties, which are likely to add to that. As you'd expect of these people, they're appealing these these decisions, so it's going to drag on further. And of course, there's all accusations and counter accusations between the pair of them about who is responsible. But hopefully we can draw a full line under this at some point soon. But I thought, as we talked about it a fair amount in the past, I would at least mention this in passing. I don't have any sympathy for them.
yeah,
Just
none,
like,
none,
this
none at all. Not at all. Like, it seems like she's might be avoiding jail time. Actually, I think both of them are going to get some jail time. But
They'll get jail time. She doesn't have to report there until April 27th, and it's like it's an interesting article. I don't propose spending too much time in it, but
yeah,
they got a lot of letters of support for her about how she's been doing charity work and stuff since, and it's like it doesn't make up for the fact of
no,
what she did. She's
no,
there should be some penance for this.
no.
So yes,
It's part of the. Yeah, John. This is something where, like you said, not a whole lot of sympathy, and um, you're right. This is not going to go away. We're going to be hearing about it for years to come. But it is. I think there's some, justice here, in that both of them will be serving some time, and still to be
yep,
determined. But I mean, at the core, it's the most evil, science business that one could ever imagine. It's where they were lovers as well. It's all wrapped into a one big mess, John, and it's the corruption
yeah.
that none of us really we live in. To me, I think I live in some sort of fairy tale land where I don't think there's any evil people in the world, and this is just an example of just how evil people can be.
Yeah, well, I mean, you think you're working. I mean, we're working for an industry that is there to. Ultimately, the goal of the industry is to help people, and there is obviously make money while you're helping people. But the overall aim is positive. But it's amazing how often these cases crop up of like insider share dealing, this kind of swindling stuff. We've had a number of cases of stealing patented information and trying to pass it off as
That's a
their own.
little
And it's
different,
like,
though, right? That's different.
yeah, I mean, it's like what yeah, it's just
The whole Steve Jobs acting that she did, right?
yeah,
She
yeah, sure, yeah,
it was so, and then like you said it, like they were taking it literally as investors were there. They were like, "Oh, look, we're running this here. We'll get this data." And then behind them, there's like 8 chemistry analyzers to get all the data that they needed. So it was like
sure.
complete. And not only that, it got to like Walgreens and CVS and just was like national. Like if you watch the special, like the whole state of Arizona, I think, was signed up to and sending tests to them, and people were like, "Wait a minute, this isn't coming back right," So it's a horrible. It's just I don't know. Let's move on, John. Let's get to the meat and
Yeah, yeah,
potatoes of our.
yeah, absolutely. Let's move on to the main topic, and so as it's December, we're a couple of days off. Well, we're moving into a holiday for everyone. Thought it'd just be nice to have uh, a review of the year at KCS because it's
What a year.
been I'll say tumultuous, but tumultuous in a good way.
Yeah, I think it's been a historic year. I mean, this is my
Yeah, absolutely.
10th
Yeah,
year, I guess, technically ninth or 10th year. But as you said, inside of that tumultuous times, it's been historic and epic, even,
yeah.
John. I don't know if we'll ever have quite a year like we had this year. And I mean,
No, we won't.
let's
Well,
let's
who
just
knows?
let's just start with the biggest thing, right? What's the biggest thing that happened this year, John?
Never say never. Well, the
Yeah,
biggest thing that
that's true.
happened was we went well. Let's give it a little bit of history. This time last year, we were in a 30,000 square foot facility and we were bursting at the seams. COVID was helpful to some extent in that, with distancing people, it made sense for those who didn't have to be on site to stay off site. So that helped alleviate some of the space concerns, although we ended up renting additional space to accommodate people. But at that time, we had building ongoing in a new facility, and of course, the May to June to July time was the official, phased move from the old bursting at the seams facility to a new custom built facility, and that's the dominant piece for the year. It sort of puts a spring in your step when you go into the new building,
Yeah, it does.
and it's also one of those things. It's a shot in the arm for the business because people will come and see that building, and it really
Yeah,
it
it's fun,
gives
isn't it, John?
a positive impression of who we are
Yeah.
based on the space. Which, not knocking the old facility, that was not something that there was a lot of band-aids
Yeah,
to
well, John, it was a
professional,
yeah, it was a 60-year-old building that we had been in for close to 20. We had done everything we could to be efficient in that building, but now the word that comes to mind for our current building is it's so much fun to go show it off, isn't it? It is an amazing facility. It is bit come see it, and anybody who's listening who's wants to, you just let us know. We'd love to bring you for a tour. It is built for purpose. It is state of the art, and it's just a incredibly efficient laboratory, and I couldn't be prouder of it, John. And being there for the ceremony when we cut the ribbon with all the local politicians and everything, and even some state politicians, was just phenomenal for our community as well. It's just been a wonderful,
sure.
wonderful.
Yeah, and that move was, I mean, it was all very interesting because the plan. We talked about the move in May to July, but it was being planned this time last year because it was. And I've been through it obviously with my previous company where it's like you can't afford you don't want to interrupt the business. So that's why the planning is careful. It has to be done very carefully, particularly when you've got instruments that, for instance, with the mass spectrometers, the mass specs operate high vacuum, so they've got pumps going all the time to keep them at a vacuum so you can do the work on them. But to move them, they have to be unplugged. So you're taking them out of their sort of natural state for doing work, transporting them, and you've got no guarantee that when they get set up in the new facility, they'll come up and run routinely. So the way it was done, similar to other moves, was you qualify the instrument beforehand, you transport it, you then pump it back down so it's back under high vacuum conditions, and then you run the exact same test in the new facility, and the instruments all survived it and came up and running, and so it was really a minimal disruption to running people's projects. So
Yeah.
it's a big deal how big deal planning it and then executing it all went well. I mean, I know there were, with any new building, there's like little ripples and stuff, but overall, it was a very successful move.
Yeah, I mean, John, we even got asked like, "Oh, did you have any methods that couldn't be transferred?" And the answer is no. And
Yeah,
we didn't have,
exactly.
maybe there was one or two that might have hit a snag here or there, but it was easy to adjust, and it was more due to just not the move. It was more the lot of material had changed, or there was an actual root cause behind it, and it wasn't the move. It was easy to solve, and so that was something that isn't a testament to our facilities team, our validation team, and just the executive team in general and their hard work. I mean, it was such a massive investment. We basically, you know, like doubled or tripled the equipment in the LBA space. That
Sure.
led to a seamless move, and then we swapped out again. I think we increased our mass spec number by 6. Right, we're up to like 27, but it was a massive undertaking to upgrade a lot of them to those 7500s and 6500s. So yeah, it was. We love you, Shawnee Mission Parkway, but we won't miss you.
Yes, exactly. We're definitely happier where we are, and so again so moving to that 70,000 square foot facility, like you mentioned, we brought in new instrumentation, which actually again helped with with minimizing any disruption, because you got new instruments up and running and ready for use before equivalent instrumentation moved over. So that really helped matters, but also the space meant that the additional space where we are now really helped expand new services
Yeah.
on like the cell and gene therapy piece particularly.
Yeah, so we had cell culture suites and flow cytometers, but they were kind of put a wall up and tried to make some aseptic space and some quasi clean room space. But now it's fully state of the art. We were able to move into the qPCR space, as well as the digital drop PCR, and really it's because of that unilateral workflow that we have, John. Right? That's a big piece
Hmm.
of the
Sure.
new facility. And for those that don't know what that is, basically it means our master mixes, our amplifications, and all of our primers, they never step foot in the laboratory where our equipment is and where the samples are. There's a separate room. There's pass-throughs. It's wonderful. I think we could even maybe bring someone from our cell and gene therapy on the podcast, and they could tell you more about the built for purpose unidirectional workflow that we have and how important that is. And that, we had been, you mentioned that we kind of rented space to get the equipment kind of installed, John, ahead of schedule. And that's when we hit the ground running and started offering services. Really, right around the September timeframe, we were offering GLP services for qPCR and digital drop PCR, and the sky's the limit, John. Now we're up to working on AAVs, shedding and biodistribution studies, to all sorts of biomarkers. It's just wonderful, and I think that's a good topic for early next year to do a podcast on. But that is the main thing that the new, not only did the new facility allow us to increase our capacity, we had no ability to grow into the molecular space or even
Sure.
really grow our cell and gene therapy space in that facility as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Good times, John. So I mean, that two big things in one: the building as well as the launching of really two service lines, because we also brought on Ellie spots. And
Sure.
for those that don't know what those are, an Ellie spot is a cell based assay that allows you to look at augmentation of T cells. And we now offer that service as a 4 spot, so you can actually look at 4 different biomarkers within a cell and look at changes from pre-dosing to on drug, which is an incredibly powerful tool. And Ellie spots are near and dear to me, John. I did a lot of them as a graduate student, and even supported several clinical trials prior to coming to KCAS. So those service lines were a big initiative, a big part of the move. But it doesn't stop there, John. We're just scratching the surface at what we did this year.
Well, this is just what happened in Kansas. Obviously, then we became an international company in the course of the year. First of all, dipping our toe in Europe, and then later in the year expanding from there. But the first piece was the acquisition of Flowmetric, and their obviously their Pennsylvania based main group, and then their subsidiary lab in Milan, and that was the first chance we could say to customers that we now have an international presence, which is a strong selling point. People do want to know that you have that ability to have a global reach, and we had it before because people can ship samples to Kansas, but this was the first instance where we could really say we have a presence in Europe, small as it was, but it changes people's perception of KCS as a company.
Yeah, we could say we're global now.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
And that merger between, or acquisition of Flowmetric by KCS, that was such a no-brainer for me personally. We had been, we're frequently, due to our size, and even though they were maybe 40-ish, right? 40 employees, 35, 40, and we were a couple hundred.
Yeah.
That we're still a similar size, mid to small CRO. They're dedicated to flow. We had a team of about 10. Now our team's about 20 here in Kansas doing it. And the team in Flowmetric has doubled. They're up to like 60, and they have since moved from their like 9,000 square feet into 27,000 square feet. So just a second move took place, John. Let's not lose sight of that. We had 2 moves this year. But the why, bringing them together, we, on our last podcast, we talked about active biomarkers and why, and we'll dive in there. But that, for me personally, it was like I kept losing to them a little bit. And what I mean by that is we would run up right against them. We'd be, companies would go out and get 3-5 requests, and I oftentimes found myself in a dogfight to win the business with Flowmetric, and because of that Milan site, and just in general, they had more horsepower than we did in terms of flow cytometry at the time. So for me, when initially it was presented to me, I was like, oh yeah, like yeah. I don't like losing.
Here we go.
I do not like losing at all. and I mean, it's one thing if someone wants to use a larger CRO. We're not. We don't even, if that's what you want, go use them. But when we were in those battles, and we were like, hey, we should be winning this, and it happened a couple, 3 times, and sure enough, within a few months, someone was like, oh, you ever hear of this Flowmetric? I'm like, yeah, yeah.
Yes. And you touched on their move to their new facility, and that happened. Is that? I'm not sure, because I'm not.
That's done. It happened this month. It
was this month.
Yeah, they've been in there a couple weeks now. It started late. We got a little ahead of schedule, John. That's the story of us. We're ahead of schedule in most of what we do, and so that move is complete. They've been there for about 10 days now.
Okay, yeah, because obviously, because I'm much more focused on the mass spec piece, I haven't been involved in that move at all, so I really haven't been.
Well, I don't get any credit for the move, other than I know it's in there, and they're just thrilled, and it's definitely just like I said, you triple your footprint at that, or almost triple, just like we did. That's a game changer. Not only that, I think of the spirit of everybody working there, right? Like I don't know about you, but like I'm just jazzed, excited, super excited about what's happening.
Sure. Yeah. And so,
I mean, from your term, John, jazzed is a technical term. I learned that as a PhD student.
Well, it might be an American technical term, but we wouldn't talk about that in the UK.
Sorry, I forgot your lip is supposed to be so stiff, right? The upper lip is
Yes, yes. And we don't get we get jazzed about aluminium. That's where we come from.
aluminum foil is what we use a lot of here. But now we're just getting silly. You can tell it's Christmas, John.
So yeah, so in terms of obviously Flowmetric come on board. So how's that from your perspective? How have you seen KCS and
Yeah.
Flowmetric working together?
Yeah, I mean, one of the major things that flow cytometric wise that they had not only I would say we mirrored each other. They were receptor occupancy, immunophenotyping, intracellular cytokines, all things we did here. They just had a lot more people dedicated to it. But the real differentiator is cell sorting. We didn't have that.
Mm-hmm.
So bringing on cell sorting, and then one of the challenges they had was when after they sorted the cells, they didn't have much to look at their cytokines and look at their. So it was a no brainer in terms of bringing the two companies together, because now we're having sorted cells sent from the Pennsylvania site to the Kansas site to do more work on, or even supernatants, and we got all sorts of things now going on molecular wise, and it's being able to round out our service line quite a bit in terms of just the addition of the Milan site, so there's no more, oh, well, we really might need a site in the future to do some work in Europe, or we want to do it in Europe. So we've had programs that we would have normally lost that we're able to win. But I think those are the two major things: the footprint in Europe and the cell sorting. And then, maybe a third one would be just their general capacity was, there's always that perception. If you were working with us and we were doing a good job, there was a worry. Well, hey, I've only met your team of 6. Well, now that we got a team of 50, you can imagine. Our lead times are a couple weeks in the flow space. Come on down and call us up. I joke, but I hope I touched on that for you, John.
Absolutely. You're right. That just having so many more people focused on it really changes customers' perception of you. I mean, it's when you're a small CRO, there's always we want to work with you more, but we're worried about your capacity. Well, if you then go from 6 to 50 people, that argument is gone. It really.
I feel like I'm being one-sided here. It benefited the Flowmetric side a lot, right? They were able to move, right? That was we helped them move. Then our HR department, our business development departments, they didn't really have those infrastructures like we do, and so that's allowed them to recruit and hire. And then obviously on the business side, it's they're feeling the full power of our business development team, John, and they're strapping in for the roller coaster ride, as we know, right? We're a progressive growing company, and they are all in on that, and certainly the last the merger took place in February. We hit the ground running, but over the last quarter, it's been an explosion. Just how there was some integration that I was part of and harmonization. That's all kind of behind us, but it's just, I don't know. It seems like it's been a really good endeavor on for both parties.
And then the next big thing
there's more.
Was towards the end.
I'm giving you but wait, there's more.
And that obviously was the acquisition of active biomarkers in France. So to really consolidate our footprint in Europe and really emphasize, so where we would say that, we have the Milan facility, which is small, so we have a footprint in Europe, we really now have much more of a presence with the acquisition of active biomarkers in Lyon. And again, it's very complementary to what we're doing here. With the focus of their work, the one thing I learned from a couple of customer presentations last week is they actually have that wider range of different instrument platforms for looking at biomarkers compared to KCS, which is a really valuable addition.
Yeah, their claim to fame, right, is they have the most biomarker platforms of any CRO in Europe. Yeah, that's a great claim to fame.
Yes.
And obviously we're KCAS Bioanalytical and Biomarker Services, so it was this was a very good fit for us. They're
agreed.
Ligand binding assay heavy. They do some PK and ADA, but we're much deeper there. Their biomarkers are very strong in the neuro space, right, John? They've got some real drug. They're pretty well known in Europe for that. But that doesn't mean they're limited to that disease state. But that is a big strength of theirs. As you mentioned, the number of platforms they have. But this now it expands KCS brand so much. The first thing is we now have 4 sites that can do PBMC isolations, followed by flow cytometry analysis. And then several sites can do much more. So we're starting to get a nice footprint there, John. I understand what Milan and Lyon, as well as like Kansas and PA, but that getting samples for PBMC analysis into liquid nitrogen, or even isolated and frozen within 24 hours, is a big challenge. And that's a whole nother podcast in terms of the difference between 24 and 30 can actually be quite critical, John. I know that sounds like, wait a minute, Tom, but like oftentimes we can get 24 hours of stability, but we do see some loss by 30 hours. And that we really need the 30 hours, John, because by the time it ships you, by the time you get a session, by the time you get 24 hours is enough time. That's why multiple sites is great, as well as just, I call it live cell assay analysis, anything that's like stat testing. We now have 4 sites. Stay tuned, right, John? More to be done there. Maybe I'll take a breath. That's just the first thing that really complements the KCS brand by bringing on Active Bio.
Well, from my perspective, although they don't have any LCMS, they obviously have a really good. They have a lot of customers who really like working with them, who are now excited that, as a company as a whole, we have LCMS, and it's opened up doors for their customers to talk to us. So it's actually it's been a really nice interaction for me, where obviously on paper I wouldn't really interact too much with active biomarkers because the platforms are completely different, but it hasn't been like that. There has been strong interaction because they're benefiting from what we have available in Kansas City to actually help them work more with their customers, and so it was a real pleasure for me to then meet the active biomarkers people at EBF, to actually have face to names and really talk properly with them. So for me, this is had much more impact on my life than the Flowmetric acquisition. But it's both I can see the value to the company. This has been a really nice one for me because it's added more to my days, etc. And more people.
Well, I guess I'm blessed and maybe cursed because it's impacted me both similarly.
Yes.
But you're really hammering it home. We can augment them with small molecules, and you find yourself they're able. The word that popped into mind when you were talking is they can compete. And I'm not saying active biomarkers wasn't a good brand and winning business, but now instead of potentially losing business because someone wants to look at something by mass spec, or even better yet, if there's an esoteric biomarker, we now offer that by what, John? Right, hybrid. Right, we're seeing so much success in the hybrid, as well as the qPCR PCR piece. So that's just one real benefit that's symbiotic. I think of it as a synergy. It helps active biomarkers because they bring a solution to all the biomarker needs, and we round them out. And of course, obviously, that we get to use the small. That's a huge piece. And then the other part is what we're encountering is people will now look at active biomarkers and say, maybe it's for a given study. And then they learn that, wait a minute, you have a site in the US. So then if they have a study going on in the US, now they're bidding on that as well. So it's a cost savings piece to be able to look at one vendor. I don't like to think of us as a vendor, but that's what we are, right? One CRO that you could do, okay, hey, my European, I want to ship it to the European site. For the US study, ship it to the US site. And so we haven't quite won any of those yet, but we're getting there, right, John? It's only been a couple months. But we're bidding on that. And then, of course, the small molecule piece. And then to round it out, John, who knows what's going to, maybe, they moved into a new facility as well, right before we purchased them. They were in the process of a move. And so they've expanded their site quite a bit. But John, I wouldn't, the idea we got what we call the mothership here in Olathe, right? But it wouldn't be
Yep.
surprising to want to maybe beef up their regulatory PK and ADA LBA work. They do some, but it's not nearly the depth we have here. So we're able to bring some expertise in those areas. And then, of course, John, personally for you've got to be thinking, hey, could we do small molecules over there? But I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I'd love that. Yes, yes.
Yeah, and
I
that's
mean, this is the review of 2022. These are the things that could possibly be happening in 2023.
Yeah.
So we do have more excitement to look forward
Did you like
to.
the way that was that was my leading story for next year, right? Like I was.
Yes.
Is that like a talking head term? I was trying to be. No, John. Not everything I say is funny, is it? No, but we're kind of getting through our agenda here, John, and I think we covered everything. How
Well,
active
I mean,
biomarkers and
the only other thing that I would add is we are laying the foundation for 2023 with other things. We talked about new instrumentation we brought in for the move, but we're also, currently assessing high resolution mass spec instruments that will build on the mass spec side for the future. And this is we're currently in the assessment phase, but this again, it'll be. It just makes to have another platform available with it just means that you can provide a more complete service, and that's coming as well.
And
So
John, why didn't we have it? We didn't have the facility for it, did we? Right? That was the rate
but that's exactly it. I mean, the need was there, but where were you going to put it in Shawnee Mission Parkway? It really needed that new facility with space to allow you to bring these additional instruments in. And yes, because
the other
only way
is
that you bring
next
it in
sequencing, right? So
take another instrument out.
Sorry, I was talking over you there. Go ahead.
Sorry, yeah. So the only way you could have brought it in previously was to take another instrument out, which you didn't really want to do because those instruments were already in samples. So
I'm sure our three senior directors are cringing the moment you said, "Oh, you're going to take away one of their instruments and not replace it with a higher end mass spec, but you're going to put a high res there." No, that's not going to happen, right? But no, the other instrument, John, is our next gen sequencing, right? So that's another endeavor that may happen in 2023. It's still, if it doesn't, it's a 2024 for sure. But we're still. We even, John, there's other things we did, right? We launched our middleware, right? We call that Holmes. Mm-hmm. So that's without getting into great detail, that was a huge endeavor. And then our EQMS system was overhauled.
Yep,
and that
exactly.
was an advancement.
Quality management system.
Yeah. And all of that happened this year as well. And somewhere in there, they didn't even make our list of top 8, right? But those are normally groundbreaking things, or at least in a normal year would be a highlight. And now it's just the throw in at the end of our podcast. And the other, round us out, it's just been an unbelievable year. You're right, John. I guess I shouldn't think like, oh, we've crescendoed and this is the height. You're right. We can take this to new heights going forward.
I'm sure. Yes. We just won't be moving to a new building next year.
Well, I don't know, John. That's this. We might be
expanding.
Yeah, exactly. That's so. We're teasing everybody there, but we have plans. We've always had plans. We're already starting to outgrow the current building, and because we plan, we can expand 30,000 additional square feet. We think if we wanted to pull the trigger on that, it would take about 12 months to execute on that. So from the moment we think, okay, we need to do that, within 12 months, that 30,000 square foot addition would be functional, John, because we've got the architects already lined out, most of the, I call it red tape and minutia for getting permits. That's all taken care of, which is awesome. Again, good planning. We did it all. John, my understanding is that may happen sooner than later, but you and I are along for the ride. They tell us they want to open that up. We're there to help them, right? But it is something that is on the radar for 2023. Well, this has been a pretty good podcast, John. I like to pat myself on the back. I don't have any more I think we've covered the agenda unless you had something else.
No, I think it was just good to have a chat through 2022, and obviously you can see that in common with you, I'm very much looking forward to 2023 and what is coming down the pike.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, the roles we have, John. You wake up one day, you think you're going to do X, and you end up doing Y, right? You rarely do it. That's just life in the CRO. But John, I think we've come to the conclusion of the agenda. I mean, maybe we'll talk a little bit about, we got a kind of a special weekend coming up. I know you got a house full of people. Why don't you tell us about your Christmas plans?
So yeah, well, it's basically today's the last day of work because we're officially off tomorrow. So tomorrow will be grocery shopping. Saturday will be baking, and then Sunday will be everyone getting together and just enjoying each other's company. And yeah, and then I'm off until the new year. So I'm really looking forward to that period of doing very, very little.
Yeah, yeah, play, maybe strumming a guitar or something like that. But you're not going anywhere sunny, are you? You're gonna stay in New
No,
York, I take it.
no, we're not going anywhere at all.
Well,
I think there's a possibility early in the new year that we might I might have a trip to Europe, but it's still in the early planning stages. That depends on my wife's travel schedule because she might have a conference to go to, and if she goes to the conference, I think I'm going to insist that I carry her suitcases.
of course, that's no. You got no strings to prevent you from doing that. Why not? So for
Exactly. Yeah.
me,
Well, we do actually have a string. The kids have all gone, but we have our old cat Rodrigo. I don't know if I may have mentioned him, but he's almost January last year. We were told by the vet that don't be surprised if you're going to come and see us in a couple of weeks and it's time to basically let Rodrigo go. He is still going. I think we're just shy of his anniversary. He basically has a growth or something bad going on in his mouth, but he's got such a will to live but he again because he's old, we get this up and down with him. So when you think you're going to travel somewhere, and it seems to always coincide, that's when he goes into one of his phases where you're thinking, I'm not sure he's going to survive many more days, so we better stay at home. But here he is almost 12 months later, and fingers crossed he keeps going. But he is just incredible.
yeah, sounds it. My brother's got a dog he's 17-year-old Dotson. 17
Yeah,
year old dog. Like, oh my goodness. And
yeah. So
like,
yeah, he's
still thinks it's like 3 years old, right? It's like barking every. I'm like, is that your dog barking? Like this dog, I remember it's been around so long. I was living in Massachusetts when they got it. That's how old the dog is. But anyway, or had been just leaving.
sure.
But, so for me,
So what's your plans?
yeah, we always
I
go
said
to.
so.
I go colder, John, because why would I try to go someplace warmer? So I trek about 200 miles north to a place called Columbus, Nebraska, and I've been going there for Christmas this will be my 23rd year going there, I think. And yeah, it's great. My wife's family, a good portion of them still live there. They rent a hall every year. There's 30 of us. Santa comes. Seems like we got a lot more young kids. It kind of goes through cycles. For a little while, there wasn't a whole lot of
Sure.
kids.
Yep.
But now we got a whole bunch of them. And I just, it's fun. It's fun to spend. That's Christmas Eve. And so her entire family will get together on Christmas Eve. And then Christmas Day, we hang out with the in-laws and we make duck and prime rib. So we have a nice little, um, I'll leave tomorrow, come home sometime on Monday or Tuesday, I think. And it's great, John. No one knows who I am. It's fantastic. I can just, her town has enough going on in it that it's not just like, a gas station and a grocery store. It's a thriving area called Columbus, Nebraska, and lots of good food, lots of enough shopping, and even a movie house if I want to go watch a movie or something. But it is, I don't know, it's incredibly. I know it maybe doesn't sound glamorous, but I'm really looking forward to it. It's a relaxing time for me, but somewhere in there, I'm going to go to Hawaii for Christmas. That's
Oh,
really what it's
nice.
about for me. Like I don't know, somewhere down the road when people say, "What are you doing?" Mine's going to be, "Oh, this is the third year in a row I'm going to Hawaii," but maybe I'm dreaming.
Yeah, we were chatting last night and thinking, oh, Outer Banks would be quite nice to do one Christmas, but whether it happens or not, who knows?
Or, or,
But
or
see, for us tonight, we're going to go do Indian food, so that's one thing off the list. And then Christmas Day, we don't do like a full Christmas dinner. We actually do like a full English breakfast, where it's like, bacon, sausage, egg, mushrooms, tomatoes, toast, tea in it. It's become a real family tradition that we there's a couple of years ago, we because we get English bacon rather than like the stuff you have in the US, and we forgot to take it out of the freezer, and the kids have never forgiven us for that since then. So we have to be really careful to make sure that we get all the food ready, so that when it comes to Christmas Day, we can do this big fry up. But that's a big part of the day. And then the other part of the day is we discovered a cocktail in a Nigella Lawson cookbook years ago called a poinsettia. And it's basically Cointreau, cranberry juice, and champagne, and it's fantastic. It's a really nice drink. Yeah. So we'll usually have poinsettias flowing while we open gifts.
I've never made one, but I have had one. I know what you're talking about. Those are tasty. We'd be remiss not to allow our producer.
I think we got to hear what Jeremy's plans are.
Jeremy, why don't you let us know what's happening?
Well, it sounds like I'm going to be making my way to John's house for an English breakfast and some poinsettia drinks. That sounds fantastic.
Anyone in the right mind would. Yes.
No, my family always, typically, more often than not, we've been in Cincinnati because that's where my wife's family is. But the last couple of years, with a young baby, then a toddler, and now just a couple months back, our fourth joining us, we won't be traveling too much. So we're, of course, weather permitting. We were talking about that before the podcast. You never know here in this Missouri, Kansas weather area. But we're planning, Christmas Eve, we're going to head to Kansas City to see some of my family. I'm really fortunate to still have my grandparents alive and well in their own house there in Kansas City, and so they're hosting a bunch of people there. But yeah, Christmas Day, like I said, with 4 kids here, one of them a baby and then a toddler. We're planning on just having a nice, quiet Christmas morning, opening gifts, and then my brother and his wife and their kids still live in town, and my sister may come, and my folks will join us in the afternoon, and then typically, like we usually like to take the kids for Christmas in the city, either Kansas City or St. Louis, or if we're in Cincinnati. But this year, I think it's just gonna be relaxing. We may make it down to the ice rink in Jeff City afterwards, or heck, I don't know, just stick around here and relax. Again, depending on the weather, but it looks to be a very relaxing Christmas. So.
Sounds lovely.
But I may ask John where he gets that English bacon he was talking about.
Oh, I can send links on that one.
Please.
It's a couple from Yorkshire who set up in Buffalo, and I think they're called like Parker's. I'll send you the link, but basically their company name is Parker's, but they changed their web link and stuff recently. But basically they have a butchery on site. And they also have, I think they have a fish and chip shop. I've been up to the premises a long time ago, but I haven't been there recently because I can just order stuff online and it turns up. So, it's for us coming from the UK. It's just it's an absolute godsend, It's being able to keep in touch with the foods that you grow up with, and it's just really nice to sort of share that with the kids,
I didn't grow up with it, but you're making it sound delicious enough that I may give it a try.
Yeah, British bacon is fantastic.
I know we're wrapping up, but you just triggered something for me. In Nebraska, they opened up a little local butchery, and so I'm looking forward to going there. That's why last time I was out there, maybe 4 months ago, I bought 80 pounds of wings. And long story there, but when they're $2 a piece, no, it was 40 pounds of wings at $2 a piece when there was a scarcity of chicken wings out there. So I have plenty of chicken wings in my deep freeze, but that store is very eclectic, and I don't know if they have English bacon, but they got a lot of cool things in there. And so that I just remembered one of the reasons why I like going to Columbus is that, you're in the heartland and plenty of meat and food, and surprisingly some good seafood, which might not sound right in the Midwest, but take my word for it. So I think we're wrapping up. John Perkins, I'll say Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Holidays to everybody, and we'll see you in 2023.
Absolutely, I totally concur with that. Happy Christmas to everyone. Have a great New Year, and yeah, have enjoy your holidays however you celebrate.